Our party just completed their first mission in Ank'harel, and we're going to talk about it, so let's dig in. Hey everybody! Before we dive in, if you're here for the crafting videos, don't worry, they're still coming, they just take a lot longer, and we have this other content that we want to get to. What went well with our session? My party is really enjoying getting to know Ank'harel and walking around and getting to see a large city. They're kind of hitting their groove as compared to the last session. It was a little rough with the open world thing, so I feel like they're doing a little bit better with as far as all of that goes. And they're really interested in trying to find more about Kael. What could be better? So during our session, I made a change of plans. This is something I had kind of been mulling over for a little while, where I had Laurel turn into one of Chozen's shipmates. And that was just to pull some backstory from Chozen into the actual campaign itself. I wish I would have fleshed that out a little bit better. So, what actually happened during our session? Our party, last we left, had just woken up from the morning and had gotten a message from the Sending Stone from Question saying, hey, I'm coming over. My superiors want to talk to you. Question comes over. They have a quick conversation with Question, and they all head out towards the headquarters of the Library of the Cobalt Soul. On the way over, they talked with Question about a few different things, including the excavation site, and she's just like, yeah, that's the excavation site to Kael, and they're like, oh my gosh, we spent so much time looking over that, and we could have just asked. So that was kind of fun. When they finally get there, they meet with Iwo, who asks them again to recount what they have been up to, so they tell him about all the visions that they've had, some of the encounters that they've had, and the interactions that they've had. They talked about the Betrayer's Rise and what had happened there. They also shared all of the visions and whatnot. They asked, well, we want to get into Kael so that we can go forward with our quest. And he's like, well, the Allegiance of Allsight is really the only ones that has access to that. They've kind of locked it off. Luckily for you, the Library of the Cobalt Soul has a really good relationship with them, and we'll do some more talking with them. They also brought up some conversations about Kael, kind of what's going on down there, and Iwo related some of the troubles that they're having as far as doing additional research. There are things down there that are preventing them, like the Aboleth, from doing more research. So they learned a little bit about the dangers of Kael. After all of that is done, he said, hey, we do have this thing that we were wondering you can help us with. We think that there's a spy inside the Cobalt Soul. He looks like this, kind of gave the description of Laurel and said, they're on their grounds right now. Follow them, find out what they're up to and what's going on. Trixie was like, all right, that sounds good. Use their owl familiar and just had their owl post up near the tree where Laurel was kind of hanging out. He hung out for a little while, seemed frustrated, took off in a carriage. So my party's like, oh crap, now we gotta go. They all go jump into a carriage and follow him into the Sigil District, where they go into the little apartment building. Laurel is gone, so they ask like the doorman, they ask a whole bunch of people where, if they know anything about Laurel, and they're all like, yeah, and they did really bad on their checks, so nobody was willing to help them. Finally, Iris is just like, screw this, I'm just going to start knocking on doors. So a couple floors of knocking on doors. Eventually they find Laurel, pretend like she is in love and has seen him on the grounds and all this stuff, and nothing's working. Finally, Chozen comes from around the corner and just like pushes them into the doorway. Everybody comes in and they have a conversation. While they were having this conversation, Chozen's kind of got him by the neck. Jimmy does a quick look around and finds lots of stuff about Zahir, one of the betrayer gods, which is not allowed to be worshipped here in Ank'harel. Trixie casts Charm Person after a few of their checks don't go so well. They eventually find out that Laurel is in Ank'harel because he stole the staff of the Adder from a high-ranking member of the Cerberus Assembly. So he's in Ank'harel trying to stay under the radar from the Cerberus Assembly, also trying to find and recruit other cultists to be worshipping Zahir, not having much luck. After some time, he eventually shape changes into one of Chozen's shipmates. And this is something I kind of added because I wanted to throw something Chozen's way. Chozen's kind of been on the sidelines for a little while, and I thought this might be fun. Chozen's me like, oh crap, I thought I was the only survivor. What's going on? The party's like, well, do we hand him into the hands of Ord, who is basically like the city guard? What do we do? Jimmy and Chozen are both like, no, we don't need to do that. We just send him on his way. And then the rest of the party's like, yeah, we should probably turn him in. Worshipping Zahir is not a good thing. Eventually, they end up calling the Hands of Ord, and they come take him away for worshipping one of the betrayer gods. So he's in prison. My party heads back to Iwo to report everything that happened. So Iwo's like, wow, that's crazy. I'm glad they're not a spy. Pretty unfortunate, but thank you guys for doing the right thing. We'll get back in touch with you after we hear back from the Allegiance of Allsight about getting you into Kael. On their off day, that took all of one day. The next day, they had kind of an off day, so Iris spends her time spreading the word of Alexian. Iris kind of has a crush on Alexian and is sick of people saying they've never heard of him. So she spends her time like doing interpretive stories and things at the theater and posting posters, I think, up around town, trying to get the word out about Alexian so that eventually she'll run into someone that says, oh yeah, I've heard of him before. A bunch of the rest showed up at the Bowl of Judgment and decided that they wanted to check that out, see if there's anything interesting. They all signed up for a fighting tournament, which I'm going to have to organize for our next session. So there's a couple different tournaments. There's one for the fighters. So some of our more martial characters signed up for that. There's one for spellcasters, and then there's a group one. So our party, a couple of members of the party signed up for each, and then they signed up for the group one as well. So I've got to throw all that together, and it should be a lot of fun. I've got some ideas for that already in the works. We'll talk about that in our next video, probably. Chozen decided he wanted to head over to the jail and just see if he could get any more information from his shipmate. So he goes in and kind of scopes out the place, and is able to talk to the prisoner. Really nothing new or interesting. He wasn't there like recruiting Chozen or anything, so Chozen's like, all right, whatever, and he leaves. Chozen also had heard of the monks of the Cobalt Soul, and he wanted to go see what they were up to. So he went to their training grounds and watched them for a little bit, and ended up fighting one and beating it pretty good. Not pretty good. It was kind of back and forth for a while, but then he ends up beating him in a fight, so some respect there. Jimmy kept trying to learn more and more about our life dome, which is kind of has that spring that comes up, so he spent some time sneaking in at night, trying to go down to the bottom, and still has not been able to go down to the bottom of that and see if he can get into Kael Marl that way. A few days later, they were contacted by Iwo, who told them it's time to come meet up. So the party heads over, meets up with Iwo. He lets them know that they're making good progress on getting them all into Kael Marl, but the Allegiance has only agreed to let accredited members of the Library of the Cobalt Soul into Kael Marl, so they need to join the Cobalt Soul, and there's a couple more steps. You can, number one, you can go and be a librarian for 6 months, or if you do some great acts for us, we can fast track you, basically. But we are making progress with them, and they're willing to let you in. He's like, we actually have one more thing. I think after this, we can probably talk some of the upper leadership into getting you into the Cobalt Soul. We have heard rumors about this guy called Old Man Kruk, who seems to be selling items on the black market. If you guys just go check him out and let us know what you find out. And he kind of gave them some gold rewards for doing so, as well as if they bring back any items, there's some reward for that as well. And that is where we ended up in our last session. So we'll see how it goes from there. I'm pretty excited to see what happens. That's pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching. I do appreciate it. We'll catch you in the next one.